Hi there, let's do lesson number 4 from A Course in Miracles in the workbook. These thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see in this room. These thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see on this street, from this window, in this place. Unlike the preceding ones, these exercises do not begin with the idea for the day. In these practice periods, begin with noting the thoughts that are crossing your mind for about a minute. Then apply the idea to them. If you are already aware of unhappy thoughts, use them as subjects for the idea. Do not, however, select only the thoughts you think are bad. You will find, if you train yourself to look at your thoughts, that they represent a mixture that, in a sense, none of them can be called good or bad. This is why they do not mean anything. In selecting the subjects for the application of today's idea, the usual specificity is required. Do not be afraid to use good thoughts as well as bad. None of them represent your real thoughts, which are being covered up by them. The good ones are but shadows of what lies beyond, and shadows make sight difficult. The bad ones are blocks to sight and make seeing impossible. You don't want either. So our good thoughts are kind of our interpretation of possibly what God has in store for us, and our bad thoughts, quote unquote bad thoughts, block us from knowing the good that God has in store for us. Paragraph 3. This is a major exercise and will be repeated from time to time in somewhat different form. The aim here is to train you in the first steps toward the goal of separating the meaningless from the meaningful. It is a first attempt in a long-range purpose of learning to see the meaningless as outside of you and the meaningful within. Let me read that again. It is a first attempt in the long-range purpose. So the Course is telling us it is going to take us quite a while. This is a long-range purpose. You will not be able to shift your thinking overnight. But it is a first step towards that goal, to separate the meaningless from the meaningful. It is a first attempt in the long-range purpose of learning to see the meaningless as outside of you and the meaningful within. We have to get clear that what is meaningful is always inside. What is meaningless is always in the outer world. It is also the beginning of training your mind to recognize what is the same and what is different. Again, here we hear that this is a course in mind training, so we're really training our mind to look at differences and what is the same. In using your thoughts for application of the idea for today, identify each thought by the central figure or event it contains. For example, this thought about Spencer does not mean anything. It is like the things that I see in this room. You can also use the idea for a particular thought that you recognize as harmful. This practice is useful, but is not a substitute for the more random procedures to be followed for the exercise. Do not, however, examine your mind for more than a minute or so. You are too inexperienced as yet to avoid a tendency to become pointlessly preoccupied. Just get stuck on a certain thought pattern. Further, since these exercises are the first of their kind, you may find the suspension of judgment in connection with thoughts particularly difficult. Do not repeat these exercises more than 3 or 4 times during the day. We will return to them later. So again, don't get stuck on patterns. So I'm going to do some just as examples. So let me just be with my thoughts and see what comes up. This thought about my dinner does not mean anything. It is like the things that I see in this room. This thought about my trip to Florida with my girlfriends does not mean anything. It is like the things that I see in this room. This thought about my dog does not mean anything. It is like the things that I see in this room. This thought about the work that I'm doing does not mean anything. It is like the thoughts that I see in this room. So we're just taking an inventory of those thoughts and letting them be no different than the thoughts that we see in this room that we have already established don't mean anything. So enjoy this exercise, and thank you so much for participating in these daily lessons. You are magnificent.